Spring training rolls on for the Guardians. We got some new players with some new tricks, some old players with some new tricks, and Cleveland lost one of their own on Monday.
Tanner Bobby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into today's episode of Locked On Guardians. I'm your host, Justin Latta, and Jeff is back with us. We got Jeff back, and got our podcast is whole again. We got one family that's not whole that we'll get to later in today's show, but we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about the Guardians' early pitching changes, some guys with new tricks, and some new guys, old guys with new tricks possibly. We'll talk about the second base battle update. We'll get into some spring training injuries as well. And we'll, of course, get to Larry Dolan passing away, the owner of the Guardians, at 94 on Monday. I am Justin Latta. Happy to have Jeff back here, but I have been covering the Guardians minor league system since 2007. I was previously the editor-in-chief of Guardians Baseball Insider, also at the News Herald, the Morning Journal, next year in Cleveland.substack.com, and Prospects Live, and here with you. So welcome on in to our everydayers, and for all of our not-everydayers, that's who I am.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. But I'll take a second and say very quickly that I'm sorry, I'm so out of the. I don't actually have to say anything, so I'm just gonna say I'm Jeff Ellis, one of your two co-hosts here at Locked On Guardians. I know it's been a long time no see, but I hope you are all doing well. For this, I was a national writer at Scott 24/7, focused on prospects and the draft.
Yep, glad to have you back, Jeff. It's good having another voice on the other side. So I know if you listen on Monday, and then maybe last week, I said I was going to have a crossover with Sully from Locked On MLB today. In light of the passing of Larry Dolan, we're going to push that back to later in the week. So I didn't think today was the right time to have that conversation with Sully, but you will hear that episode later this week. Today we thought we'd focus a little bit on that and the Guardians spring training game, so we will address that at the end of today's episode. We'll get to the game first. Before we get into that, I want to let you know you should become an insider if you'd like. I had some good conversations today with our insiders for Locked On Guardians. Some of the information we're going to talk about, our insiders already kind of know about. So if you want to get in and join the conversation, you can do that at the link on your screen or in your show description. Would love to have you. We're sending out information almost every day, observations, answering questions. Jeff's got some draft data in there. We're doing bonus content, leftover topics we didn't get to, and then mailbag only or subscriber only mailbag. So enjoy that. And we're only 30 subscribers away from YouTube, 4K on YouTube. I can't get the order of words right. That's always good. Yesterday we're like under 50. Now we're under 30. So appreciate y'all making that happen, making that push. We appreciate that. And I don't know, we'll do something fun when we get to 4K. Of course, I might be in Arizona when that happens. So Jeff might have to do something fun when we get to 4K, or maybe I'll try to jump on my phone. We'll see. Speaking of new accomplishments, Jeff, so let's kind of start off with Monday's game. First time we've seen Slade Cecconi as a Cleveland Guardian, and I'd say it went pretty well. Obviously, all the caveats apply with spring training and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that was most interesting about Slade Cecconi's first appearance with the Guardians is we saw that sinker pop up, and one of our favorite data guys is TJ Stats over on Twitter and Blue Sky is Thomas Nestico. And if you're looking on the screen on YouTube, and I can upload this into our drive too and give credit to Thomas, but he did debut this new sinker. So it's got last year Cecconi's fastball was very awful. Like it was averaging 94, 95, but it was getting hammered. It was negative 11 run value on Savant and a slugging percentage of 586. It was a pitiful pitch for him despite the velocity. And he talked about last week with Anthony Castrovitz about moving fastballs in different directions. So we haven't seen the cutter, I don't think, yet, but I think he has one. Although, the slider might have been a cutter. I think we did see some sliders get tracked as, or cutters tracked as sliders. So I'll have to be corrected if I'm wrong there. But the sinker was the thing we saw the most of on Monday afternoon. 4 sinkers, about 92, 94 with that. He's more 94, 96 with the fastball. And with the 4-seam, I should say. And, cool to see he got a couple of whiffs on the fastball. which is good. Not something he was really good at a year ago. Now, again, caveats apply. It's spring training. Guys are still getting their timing back at this point in the spring. But the more we see of these new pitches, these new fastballs, it's really important for Cecconi. And the results on day one look good. Like I said with Tristan McKenzie on Monday, you just want to stack good days in a row with these guys. A lot of these guys just want to put together good outings, good bullpens, and just stack good days in a row. And I think that's a good start for Slade Cecconi. I think the most important thing about the sinker, too, is to have fastballs that go in different directions so guys can't sit on one plane of movement with heat, because players oftentimes will not pick up spin. It's hard to read spin, but what you can track is you react to is velocity. So if you know you're getting a fastball, you can look in one spot. You don't have to worry about movement because Cecconi's fastball was not moving anywhere last year. Now, when you're getting something that's harder, that's not a changeup, not a slider that Cecconi has, now you've got to wonder, is that fastball going to be coming away on his arm side? Is it going to be going glove side? And you have to adjust to that. And that should allow him to keep the fastball off the barrel. And having a sinker is also good with his changeup too, because it gives you something that runs in the same direction and they're different velocities. So you can really get some separation there and some stuff that moves the same way at different speeds that can throw hitters off. So really important developments for Cecconi, and no surprise. I think we knew this was something they were hoping for.
Yeah. I think one of the big things I was talking to you before the show is when the Naylor trade was announced. Yes, I do think they were looking to move Naylor and rather quickly because, they wanted to get Santana on that first base market was heating up. But I don't think it was quite as happenstance as I thought at the time. And I think we're seeing just how much this was a target. I'm sure they've probably had multiple discussions over the years on Slade Cecconi. I bet they probably discussed him at, various points in the offseason before coming to that trade. And we talked about it. All the pieces and parts are there. If he can get a actual weapon with that fastball, he's got some mid rotation upside there. There's a reason why he's a first round pick. He just hasn't developed quite the way I think that Arizona had hoped. And it is interesting just how quickly he has jumped into these adjustments and Cleveland had a plan from day one. And it's exciting. I don't think there's any other way to put it other than Josh Naylor is a fantastic player, but he's a first base only. And it was 1 year of a first base only. If you get 6 years of a starter, then you win that trade every day of the week.
Not to mention the comp pick, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing to note, too, about player acquisitions here is when you look at, like, pro scouting and you look at the minor league side of things, like, I don't know how many scouts the Guardians are deploying in terms of the minor league side and in the pro side, but very clearly they tracked Cecconi and they track other guys. And it's not like they just acquired this guy and were like, all right, well, how can we fix him? Like, the general, I think the rule of thumb on a lot of the way that at least the Guardians operate when you're talking about acquiring players and trading and scouting is that you're looking at guys that you're interested in. And they might have been interested in the draft a couple of years ago, for all we know. Wouldn't be surprised.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're scouting these players and because all 30 teams are keeping tabs on all players from all the organizations, like, everybody's got at least video, if not in-person looks at these guys, and everyone's getting data for the most part. Some teams aren't sharing, but the data might just be available at the ballpark. Yeah, yeah. They love to hoard data a little bit and not share. But they're getting data from some of these teams, and they're also doing in-person looks, and they're also doing video scouting. So you're keeping a file on every player you've ever looked at. So when you're talking to teams, you're not going in and saying, well, who can we acquire? Like, no, you got a list of players you're already interested in. And when you got the players you're already interested in, if they're not like already established major leaguers, these are the reasons we like them. These are the things we want to do to partner with them on to improve and develop them. And that's how Cleveland has to think too. Like, that's for a team how Cleveland operates. When you acquire players like a Slade Cecconi, you're targeting a player like a Slade Cecconi because you have a chance to succeed in that trade with Josh Naylor because you can optimize Slade Cecconi in a way other teams don't. And you have to focus on that because that's the way you acquire players. That's the way that the Guardians build their teams, right? So it's almost, I don't want to say, I know someone's going to say Island of Misfit Toys, but it's taking guys that you see potential. And it's like, I don't want to say it's like buying a flip. It's just more like getting a house that you see the potential in and you want to help make it better. Like that's the best way I can put it, I suppose. I know that's maybe not the best way to put it, but when you're acquiring a player like Slade Cecconi or anything, you have a list of items that you're like, okay, these are things we can improve. We think we can improve with him on.
Traits over features.
Right. Traits over features and traits over past statistics and performance. Like it's just about where we know what this player has done, but
And they know what
do
they
we think
can
the player
do.
could do? Right. They know what they can do. What improvements would help them become a better player with the Guardians. All right, we got to talk about Joey Cantillo. We have to talk about the second base battle. We got to talk about some injuries as well, and then of course we have to talk about the Guardians' father of the owner now, Larry Dolan, passing away on today's Lockdown Guardians. Appreciate all of you making Lockdown Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever you get podcasts. As you know, we are free on everywhere you can get a podcast: Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You can listen without ads. And I don't know, Podcast Addict is one I've seen the other day. Like that was a new one I didn't know about. We're on YouTube as well. So I appreciate you guys doing that. Make sure you're auto downloading so you never miss an episode. Make sure you're hitting the bell on YouTube so you never miss a video. I will be posting some videos from Arizona, so you're going to want to get those. So hit the bell on those as well. And appreciate
Pocket
you guys
Cast
being
is
here.
what I use. I was just kind of pulling it
Pocket
up.
Cast, okay.
That's
I used to
fine.
use Google Podcasts, and they shuttered it, and now I'm going to Spotify more. And I don't really like Spotify's podcast features, if I'm being honest.
I've been using Pocket Cast for years now. That's my go-to.
Yeah, I will say I do watch a lot of my podcasts on YouTube if they're on there too. So that's because I work from home and I can do that. All right, let's talk about Joey Cantillo. We talked about Slade Cecconi having a new pitch. Joey Cantillo is not really an old dog with a new trick because he's still pretty young. But Cantillo, for his first outing here, a lot of strikes. 21 pitches, 17 strikes, 7 of them called. You and I have been all over Cantillo for, since the Guardians acquired him back in 2020. And it's still funny to me that when they acquired him, he was like a finesse over stuff guy. And
Yeah.
over the years, he has become a stuff over finesse guy. And he had a hard time battling injuries, that kind of stuff too. If he could put the strike throwing together, Joey Cantillo can be a really, really fun pitcher, and the health too. So I know he said, and of course he's going to say this because that's the one thing that's been holding him back besides health is control. But he said that was the focus for him over the offseason was control. But on this day, 2 called strikes with the fastball, 2 with the changeup, 1 with the curve, 2 with the slider. You love to see that in the first outing with Cantillo. A little more carry on the fastball. I saw some other data out there from, I think, Eric Samolsky, who said that he added 4 inches of carry on his fastball. Cantillo doesn't throw a high spin fastball. It is if you look at just by pure spin, it's a pretty meager fastball. And he only averaged today 92 at the fastball, which last year he was about 90, 93, 94. So it was a little bit down to start. Not a big deal right now. But what makes Cantillo's fastball special, obviously, is the extension, because the extension he gets allows that fastball to look more like 94, 95, so he doesn't have to throw that hard. But if he's commanding all of his stuff, he's already got a plus changeup, right? The curveball is above average. The slider's pretty good. The fastball is good because of extension, even though it's not velocity. He can put all that together. I'm really, it's funny they paired these two together, by the way. Do you notice that? They paired Logan Allen and Tristan McKenzie together the first time out, and now they've paired Cecconi and Cantillo together. And these 4 guys are all competing for a rotation spot right now. And they're going to stretch out Jacob Junis too. We'll see what happens there. But I think it's interesting they paired these guys together. And so far, I'd say these 2 had great performances their first start. And, Allen and McKenzie were pretty solid too.
Yeah. You just want to go out and see them look steady and solid. I understand that they are facing a lot of players who, are not part of the future for, the opponents that they're facing. But the important thing is to go out and look good against those guys. You want to see the pitchers go out because you want to see everyone go out and perform well. You're just looking for any positive momentum for a lot of these players who have struggled. And, I don't take a ton away from spring training. I think this is one of those well-known things that I'm very cautious in my.
You don't like spring training? What? I didn't know that about
just
you.
very cautious in what I take away from it. But it's the things like Mackenzie having velocity and just trusting himself. As we know, everyone wants to talk about he wasn't injured last year. It was all mental. With Cantillo, the stuff is there. The stuff is there to be in this rotation. Can he command it? And I think the other part of it too is like he didn't get a lot of opportunities after that really poor ALCS game 1. He got put into a really hard situation, and you also just want to see how a guy's going to respond and if that stuff's going to stick with him. You don't want to have a Rick Ankiel moment. So it's also nice just to see him kind of come out and show the opposite because of what he was under before. So I think you're looking for the positives, and you can never have too much pitching depth. Let's be honest. Some of these guys who are looking great now are going to start getting shelled as we get closer to camp. That's just the way of it. And they also have the ability to, send some guys down and to take their time with it. They loaded up on pitching for a reason, so they don't have to sit there and have, the 3 worst starting pitchers in the American League for half of the year.
Spencer Howard.
I mean, God, he was the worst, but he was only like 2 start. But I mean, statistically, Mackenzie, Allen and Carrasco were just some of the worst pitchers in the American League, and they kept having to go to them because they didn't have anyone else. So it's huge to have this depth now, and hopefully we'll see this depth pay dividends, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think we're going to see it a lot sooner too. We'll get more into that as the week and as camp goes on too. Gabriel Arias hit a home run in this game as well, and performances, stats. I'm not going to sit here and draw all kinds of conclusions. I mentioned on Monday's show that early in camp, like you're just looking for guys to at least do something interesting off of guys who are major leaguers, and not off guys. As someone put in our comments, bagging groceries next week. R.I.P. Bob Uecker. But Arias has never had a hard time hitting the ball hard. Like he's always produced good exit velocities. That was a whale of a home run he hit on Monday, obviously. I thought the comments, though, by Stephen Vogt were the most interesting about him and about Daniel Sheeman. And the Daniel Sheeman comment was before the game, and Paul Hoynes asked him about, where does Sheeman fall in terms of the second base competition? And Vogt's reaction was, yeah, he'll get time at second base. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, he's right in there with all the other guys. Like, it wasn't like I'm not going to overlook their words, too, because we also have to be careful not to buy too much into their words because the actions mean more. But I will say, some of our listeners our everydayers do like the everyday second base update because it is a big thing this spring. So we've gotten Gabriel Arias, Juan Brito, and now Angel Martinez at second base the first 3 games. I'll see if Sheeman works into that. But to me, that I'm gonna look in. I'm not gonna read into Vogt's comments too much, but I'm gonna watch a little closely to see how they work in Daniel Sheeman if he becomes the guy that gets more reps at second base because he hasn't so far, and he hasn't started there. And then after the game, he also talked about Gabriel Arias and said, yeah, second base is not a position he's really played a lot of in his career. It's probably the position he's played least, but he said they trust him anywhere, and he's going to get reps at all the places too. And earlier this offseason, before we got into camp, and you and I both said this, right? We both said that if Arias isn't the opening day second baseman, he might not be on the team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of walking that comment back. Yeah, we did have an everydayer and an insider. I think it was David, but I'm not sure. Shout out to whoever it was that brought this up. But said like, what's the contingency plan if something happens to Rocchio? Because like Daniel Sheeman and Tyler Freeman, they can play short, but those are guys that you want to play at shortstop like once a week or once every other week to give Rocchio a day off. If something happened to Rocchio, you don't want those guys playing 5-6 days a week at shortstop. They clearly don't trust Martinez there anymore. So, like, Gabriel Arias right now Brito can't do it. So, they're going to continue to work him as a utility guy. I'm not sure I think that's going to work for him. But, how can you ignore the guy if he just hits and you'll find a position for that. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, but again, this is one of those things where they said something, and I'm going to watch to see how they actually deploy him and how that turns out for him.
Yeah, I think it is a situation where it's hard to say who's your backup, right? Like who is your extended backup? And they don't weirdly have a lot of players who it feels right now like they're comfortable at that position. And I'm not even sure how comfortable they are with Gabby there with the way they've deployed him. So it's
But he's a better option
he
than the
is
other
he
guys I
is,
mentioned.
but it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in that regard, just because we've joked for years about all the infield depth, and now it's like, well, is it all of a sudden we're maybe lacking some of that infield depth? So I'm just kind of curious to see, um, how the second base position goes. I mean, we're all very much are. I'm not saying anything that anyone else isn't feeling, but just like who could be the backup? If it's not it, and then also we still haven't heard, like, did Freeman get another option? Like, we're pretty sure Noel did, though it was never announced. It's like,
Freeman already had one. Yeah,
had one.
Noel does.
So
He's on their official roster with an option.
I
But
feel
Freeman got
like
one, yeah.
I feel like Freeman is probably ticketed to the minors. Like I don't see a great pathway for him. And they have so many guys. It's just going to be um, interesting to watch, because I don't know who I would say is their contingency shortstop. Like, who's the third shortstop up? Like, if they really need someone to play for a month, who is that guy?
Yeah, that's exactly the point, right? That's what I'm saying. So now I'm kind of walking back the Arias comments. All right, real quick, let's run through a couple things before we kind of move on to talk about Larry Dolan a little bit. But Ano Martinez got to start at second base in this one. So that, again, we're 3 days, 3 different second basemen. They are getting a lot of looks to everybody. Some camp injury and updates to pass along. Chase DeLauder, as of right now, is fine. He's supposed to get into a game later this week. They're kind of bringing him along slowly. They've got a very specific plan for him, and it sounds like it's just like a conditioning / build-up thing. Obviously, they got to be very careful with him. So as of right now, he is fine. Guy who is not fine, unfortunately, is Franco Alaman. He is going to see a general surgeon this week, according to Stephen Vogt. He has a hernia. He might have a hernia. He doesn't have a hernia. He might. He's going to see the general surgeon. And he did clarify it's not a sports hernia. I'll leave that to the doctors a little bit more. But this is something we talked about in the past. Alaman's had some injury issues to deal with in the past. And this, to me, again, is another reason why you bring in Paul Sewalds and Jacob Junis, because everyone's like, oh, just put Alaman at the back of their bullpen. And this is why, because he's had injury issues in the past. And for a bullpen that's probably due for some regression, you need to have as many options available to you as you can to stave off regression. And now we're seeing it again with Alaman, which really stinks for him, because he can be a special reliever, but this isn't the first injury issue he's had to deal with. Eric Sabrowski being brought along slowly. He's going to be, sounds like he's fine, but they are, cautious, because he's a two-time Tommy John guy, went to AA to the majors last year, and is pitched a lot of innings. So they're going to be careful with him. And honestly, they don't have very many left-handed options. It's Tim Herron, it's Sabrowski, and Parker Mashinsky. Like, the lefty situation isn't great. I talked this on Monday, but Tanner Bybee will not pitch until probably the end of the first week of March. So next weekend, possibly. Heard he looked good in the backfields, though. Heard he's throwing mid-90s already, striking guys out. So things are good there. And then one of our everydayers brought up is Rocchio, best shape of his life candidate. He might be, because he's bulked up a little bit. And then on Wednesday, we'll get our first look at Luis Ortiz. So I'm excited for that.
No, I don't have much to add. I said we had to break, come back, and talk about a controversial Cleveland figure in some regards.
Yes, Cleveland did lose one of its own on Monday afternoon, so we do have to talk about Larry Dolan. Rest in peace, Larry Dolan. More on that in a minute. When the NBA action gets going and tips off, the game is just getting started. There is no better place to get in on than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to bet in the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. Bet Cavs in the fourth quarter. They always close it out, even without Darius Garland. Donovan Mitchell, fourth quarter man. Get it done. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine them with your live bets in the same game parlay. I am one of those people. If I'm going to bet on something, I do like the same game parlay. I like to stack things and see if I can check them off the list and add up my money a little bit. Guardians still 82.5 over under on wins on FanDuel. I checked. I'm still going to take the over on that. I think I'm going to buy the pitching. AL Central is just wide open, and 82.5 doesn't seem far-fetched. I thought 85 wins win the division a year ago, and it did. It was more than that. And even though offense might be interesting, pitching should be good enough. I don't really fear anybody else in the division more than the other. So check on that. Right now, if you're a new FanDuel customer, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, well, sports are one of those things that are supposed to distract us from real life. And, Jeff, as you can attest, and I think we all can attest at different times, sports are the fun thing that, takes us away from anything we're dealing with in real life. And that's why they exist. That's why we like to talk about it. That's why we're grateful to be able to come on here and talk every day for a half hour about the team we grew up loving and the sport we grew up loving. And we have all these amazing fans that we can connect with that listen to us that, give a crap about what we say for some reason.
I haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, some days I can't figure it out either, truthfully, especially when I was flying solo last week. But, sports are those things that are fun diversions and keep us away from the rigors of everyday life. And, that's what I can say about Larry Dolan. Cleveland guy who bought his hometown team. That's quite a dream, honestly. Like, this has been a very stable period for the Guardians. I can't tell you how often growing up I heard from my dad about how terrible the teams he were when he was growing up, and how often he felt like they were going to move out of Cleveland. And when I post the episode with Sully later in the week, you'll hear some talk about that as well, about how the Guardians were almost the New Orleans team, I think. But my dad talked a lot about growing up too, about how Cleveland was always bad and they almost didn't have teams in different years. And this has been a stable period for the Guardians. I know people are going to have their feelings about the Dolan family, and that's fine. I'm not going to tell anybody how to feel. You can feel how you want, but let's remember too that these people are people too, and they have feelings, and they have a family. They lost a family member, and for all the things you want to say about money and payroll and everything else, the Guardians have been a successful team. Could they have won more with more money? Maybe, probably. That doesn't take away from the success they've actually had. And I can't think of anything more of a dream outside of winning the World Series than growing up in Cleveland, loving this franchise, watching baseball, loving the sport, and having the chance to own that team. Like that's a heck of a dream. And things have been stable. The team remains in Cleveland. They've gotten stadium upgrades, progressive field, Jacobs Field, whatever you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. It looks as new as the day it opened, and they keep doing renovations. And I know, taxpayers are definitely footing the bill on some of that, but life is often not perfect the way we want it. But I will say I am definitely grateful for somebody who grew up in Cleveland, who was able to purchase the team, keep it in Cleveland, steward a good, stable franchise. Yes, we all want a World Series. I want a World Series, but I'm not saying you have to accept less, but there's still value in that stability. And I think that's a key tenet of ownership. And I think that is one of the things you can remember Larry Dolan for. I saw a comedian over the weekend, not to continue to go on this tangent here. I saw a comedian over the weekend, and he said, "You guys really love yourselves." He said, "Cleveland, you guys really love yourselves." He goes, "Nobody else likes you, but you guys like you." And we do. Clevelanders love themselves. We love Cleveland. It's kind of like having a little brother you can pick on, and but if somebody else picks on him, you're going to defend him, right? And that's how I feel about Cleveland. I think that's how Larry Dolan, he was a Cleveland guy, and I think he clearly loved this city and he loved this baseball team for all the other things you can say.
Yeah, my one, it's the longest tenured ownership group Cleveland has ever had. This team was, let's be honest, it was a disaster pretty much from the 60s till the 90s. And yeah, that Jacobs bought and kept the team. And I know people come in and talk about that. So it's very fair to point that out. Dolan came in and bought the team at peak. Let's be honest. The Jacobs also sold at, I mean, maybe not peak value, but peak in terms of where this team was going to be without competition, without anything going on, with them being the apple of Cleveland's eye. One of the things I do want to point out is that, like, he often gets looped in with his brother's net worth, and Larry Dolan was just a lawyer. Like, he made a lot of money as a lawyer, don't get me wrong, but he is not Charles Dolan, who, you know, founded HBO and sold it, who came up with video on demand and sold it, who,
Cablevision.
you know, Cablevision. Like this, Charles Dolan was a pretty terrible owner by the end. Some of that stuff in New York is pretty crazy, but like he, Charles Dolan was kind of a genius when it came to the early days of cable. Larry was not. If you remember Sports Time Ohio, it was janky as heck for that small time that they had their own network for what, like 2 years. Yeah, during this time year, this team had the 7th most wins in baseball, and that was in the middle of a transition period. There were some ups and downs, but the best thing he did was buy the team, and I believe that was not long after, or right after, or maybe right before Shapiro's handoff. Let the smart people be in charge, got out of the way. He actually tried to buy the Browns. One could make a case that he might have been the best owner for the Browns, like put smart people in and stay out of the way. Could have been, I think anyone who's a Browns fan right now is like, oh, that a non-meddling owner who could have put smart people in and then backed off. That would have been helpful. You know, I think I understand the flack. I understand wanting to spend more. It's unfortunately what happens when you get the guy who doesn't really have the money to run a baseball team who buys the baseball team. There was no other revenue streams. There was only the baseball team when he took this team over. So they didn't have some of that money. And I think one of the big things I was reading through Evan Drellich's recent piece is, you know, with Blitzer, it's going to be that village. Like if you read that Evan Drellich piece, it talks about the money the Braves are making off of their village approach and how that is leading to funds. And I think that's one of the things where maybe I don't know if you can say they missed the boat by not doing that earlier. I don't know how much how much people would have been up for that in Cleveland at the time.
There was nothing to buy at the time. There's nothing to buy.
You know, I think he stewarded the team well. I've always been like, he is a mid-tier owner. I don't think he is. People get very upset about money, and I understand it. And I wish books were open, and I wish it was a more level playing field. But plain and simply, this is a market that they couldn't even do a lesser deal with Bally's. They didn't want to have any business with Cleveland. They're one of the markets that got completely dropped. It's a small market, and they, it's hard to say he was a good owner because I don't know that monetary side. Like maybe he was taking, money out of the team all the time. I don't know that. I'm also not going to accuse him of that on his remembering one. But what I do know about him is what made him, for a time when he was in Cleveland, the best owner in Cleveland was he put smart people in charge and got the heck out of the way. And that is an approach that other owners, frankly, in this city could learn a lot from. And again, I'll say he might have been the perfect owner for the Browns. Like there's a part of me now that looks back and goes, man, I wish that he had bought the Browns. And I don't know who would have, been the person, like who was that's what I got to go dig up. Like who was the secondary, was there a secondary bid back when Jacobs was intrigued? Like who would have been the situation? Because if we would have got a worse owner then, I'm not trading, the Guardians are my favorite team. So I'm not trading worse ownership of this team. But in a world where you can make so much money in the NFL, that might have been actually where he would have been the stronger owner. But like I said, he was middle of the pack. I'm going to stand by that. Don't go and Google his net worth because that's just incorrect. I'm going to let you all in on something because I'm afraid for a lot of people. Your brother's money or your sister's money isn't yours. Please don't take it. You can't, that isn't your money. And for some reason, Larry Dolan and Charles Dolan get listed as having the same net worth because that is Charles Dolan's net worth. That is not Larry's. Larry was a very successful lawyer. Their dad was an inventor who sold a patent to Ford. So there was some money for all of the kids and they all did their own separate things. But your siblings' money is not yours. Don't assume that.
I think I would get in a lot of trouble trying to take my siblings' money, mostly because I don't have a sibling.
You say, don't you not have any?
I don't have any. So I think a lot of people, I would be questioning, a lot of people would be questioning what I was doing too. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not telling anybody how to feel. You can feel however you want. I just continue to put there are bigger things than sports. Family comes before all of that. And, stability is super important. It's important in family, and it's important in sports to a degree. Money is important. I think when they bought the team, it was a good investment at the time in terms
Very
of
good.
what that ownership model was still doing well at the time. Things have changed a lot over the last 20 years, right? So, or 25 years. Some things you can foresee, some things you cannot. But the one time the Steinbrenners wanted to buy, George Steinbrenner wanted to buy Cleveland, but who knows if he would have moved him. And
he wouldn't have spent like he did. Let's be honest. Like he
the
spent
market's the
because he had
market,
that.
right?
Yeah.
The market's the market. But yeah, I just think at the end of the day, like, this is a guy who grew up in Cleveland. He loved this city. He loved this team. He got to buy them, and he got to keep them in Cleveland. He got to see them have some high moments. I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of owners out there right now who are spending money at the end of their lives, and there's something to be learned about that too. You just want to pour that money in, like the Illiches and the Seidlers and all that kind of stuff. There's something
He
to be
seemed more
learned from
content
that too.
to pass it on to his kids.
Yeah, and we'll see how things go from there. But again, this is a guy who lived here, who grew up here, who was a fan and loved. I think genuinely was a member of the Cleveland community, and loved this team, and got to live out a dream. And I'm not saying, again, you have to feel the same way. I'm just saying, like, this is family, and someone lost their father, their grandfather, their brother today, and the things have been pretty stable. We've had a pretty competitive team the last decade. They haven't gotten over the hump. Hopefully they will at some point soon. I'm sure it would have been nice to have it happen during his lifetime, but I think there's still quality in stability, and, like you said, hiring people who are smart and getting out of their way, and not not getting involved. I'm not saying that makes a good owner. I think you'd like to leave a better legacy than that, if I'm being honest, but still wishes, but thoughts and prayers to the Dolan family and the whole Cleveland community on that one. All right, let's see. We do have an episode banked with Sully then from Lockdown MLB. As I said at the top of the show, we did not want to release that today, given the timing of the events today, but we'll have that this week as well. Maybe Thursday, so Jeff can have the night off again, and I'm flying to Arizona. We got to do a position preview at some point too. We got to get into those. So that's all coming up the rest of the week of Lockdown Guardians. Like I said, I'll have some videos from spring training as I get out there this week too. So stay tuned for all that. Make sure you're downloading on YouTube and subscribe, review, sign up to be an insider, email the show at loguardianshow.com, at gmail.com.
Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Justin for picking up so much slack while I had a loss in my own life, if I'm being honest. So thank you to everyone for joining us. Let's get us up to 4,000. Thank you all again for your support. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as we always go, let's end it. Go, Guardians, go.